So now that you're talking about some of the new perspectives that the Communist Party is wanting to deal with, or they're not new issues, but new things that for the party maybe. Are there sort of some immediate burning issues that you think should be taken up, or you are already planning to take up?
Of course. When we talk about environment, we're talking about practically all forms of pollution that are facing people currently in Lebanon, because there are huge projects, specifically huge infrastructure, dams. There are changes in the environment that people cannot actually face on themselves as smaller communities. At the level of feminism, there's the everyday patriarchal behavior, as well as the institutionalized economic differences between men and women. At the level of the working communities and the domestic workers, for instance, because we have a lot of migrant workers as domestic workers, we're talking about changes of laws as well as changes of social attitudes toward the migrant workers. At the level of, let's say, arts and culture, we're talking about a production that is production of artistic and cultural artifacts that are inherently linked to the communities, and they're not produced to please the Western eye. They're talking about the problems of the disenfranchised communities instead of actually portraying a better view of the community in general. So basically, these are the ideas we're talking about.
Do you think that now, if you're going to deal with these sorts of issues, that two things: one is, would that help get the party more popular support, because you're now actually taking up issues that are in some senses really touching the hearts and minds of people? And secondly, to build alliances with non-party political processes.
Okay. Building alliances, we had started with this since 2015, trying to building alliances with non-party groups and associations and independent activists, etc. The situation in Lebanon is, unfortunately, as I started to say, that the liberalization is so strong to the extent that until now we have not been able to form a front. That's what we were trying to do. A front of different groups, not necessarily Marxist, of different groups who are anti-system. Unfortunately, till now, this front has not been able to be formed because of this, let's say, reformist kind of attitude from the various groups, and at the same time, the lack of political knowledge. So, but we're still thinking and working towards the formation of such a front, even if it was not necessarily in major cities. Meaning in villages, around communities who are forming their own groups, even for specific issues, meaning environmental, etc. So we don't agree with them on everything, but we can agree on the basic causes here and there. So we're definitely working on this. The first question.
More popular support for the party?
It is not only more popular support that I think we are aiming for, because a popular support, I mean, like Modi can have popular support because of all the propaganda and the media that is supporting him, right? So I don't think we're working only towards that. We definitely want that, but based on a lot of actual a discourse that is accessible to people, that talks about their everyday suffering, and that means something for the majority of the disenfranchised community. So we need to represent and be one way or another their voice.
But just in terms of the fact that the kind of so-called liberal democracies that we have place a lot of emphasis on political parties and on taking over the state, progressive forces taking over the state and so on, or another conception of democracy where you say that it's the people at the grassroots who need to be empowered, and that parties and so on can only and should only be there to facilitate that kind of empowerment. What's your view on this, and what do you think the party can work towards?
Okay, I think let's say the context is different. I wrote an article, I think 3 years ago, saying the left should stop being so utopic, in a way that we were talking for years about just acting on the ground and not wanting to get into power in Lebanon. So it was some kind of very I don't want to say it's religious, but it was some way of sacrificing ourselves just for this. So I think what we're asking for right now is both. working with the people on the ground, representing them, understanding what they want. I don't want to talk about myself. I know my privileges. I know what I have been going through. I want to connect with these communities and allow them and push them to the foreground. But I also want to do this by gaining power. So I think both of them should be worked on at the same time.
And what about international alliances? Do you have any? Are you planning for more? And with what kind of forces around
International
the world? Alliances.
Oh, definitely, yes. Since we became part of this leadership in 2015, I think the whole reading is also the whole reading of the international lens was very much in parallel with our internal and regional lens. Talking about new alliances with the groups that we see are active on the ground, have a similar view of our as much as we have a certain view of what's going on around us. Having connections and alliances with people who don't necessarily call themselves communist in a place where they are acting based on similar ideas. So yes, we are widening this kind of connections that we have. Thinking that at the same time it is very important to build these networks, to learn from one another. Our General Secretary keeps saying, and I'm quoting him not because he's a General Secretary, but because of how much I learned from him. He keeps saying that the capitalistic forces and powers are working together, even if at certain moments they have conflicting needs, while we are divided and fighting with one another. So it is very much the time for us to unify under different forms and platforms.
Wonderful. All the best,
Thank
Jana,
you very
and
much.
Shukran. Thank you.
Thank you.